State Senator Carol Alvarado, thanks for coming.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
You bet. Senator represents the Houston area, and you recently wrote a letter to the Texas Health and Human Services Commission about their role in the well-being of the kids in these detention centers in Texas. What was in the letter, and have you heard back from the commissioner?
Yes. Great to be here. Congratulations on the Texas Signal.
Thank you.
We wrote a letter inquiring about the state's responsibility and role in these centers. We did receive a letter from the commissioner stating that they did not have any jurisdiction with these centers. So I wanted to dig a little deeper, and we had a phone call yesterday because I wanted to have a clear understanding of when the state has a responsibility in these facilities. So what I learned, a few things. One is when it is a completely 100% federal detention center owned, operated by the federal government, whether it's Border Patrol or somebody else in the federal government, the state has no role or responsibility. However, if it is a federal center that contracts with someone, say nonprofit or for-profit, anyone, then the state does have a responsibility. There is a process for getting a child care license and a residential license. Now, I had a bill that unfortunately didn't make it through the process, but this bill would have given in the game with a center such as whether it was Southwest Key or someone else, where there would be discretion given to the commissioner, the head of the agency, to deny a permit for various reasons.
So was she receptive in the letter?
She was very receptive, was very forthcoming with information. I have asked now for a list, and we're compiling all this, a list of all the centers that the state has a role in. I also wanted to know what triggers an inspection, and what I learned is that they do an annual inspection of the facility. Aside from that, they have if there's a variance request, say for increasing the population, that would trigger an inspection or a complaint driven. So I've also asked for both of those. Who's requested a variance and what complaints have been filed and what was the result. So I just made that request yesterday, so we're gathering all that. Once we get that, we'll have that available.
So what do you this has been an issue obviously very much in the state, right? What do you want to see? The goal is to have these kids being well taken care of, and I guess from a state perspective, is there anything else that the state, whether it's that commission or somebody else, could do to mitigate this situation?
Sure. I think minus my bill that would have brought a lot of scrutiny to the process, knowing exactly what the state's role is, I think gives the public kind of a clear idea of what we need to be doing as a state. And this has given us a black eye, not just around the country, but in the world. I did an interview this week with the BBC. So this doesn't look good for Texas. Mm-hmm. And if the state has a role to play, then we need to exercise every bit of power and authority, and also let the public know where our responsibility lies. Now, it's difficult if it's just a federal detention center, because our hands are tied a little bit, but I've asked, how do these places get permits for occupancy? Maybe, I'm guessing, because I know just in dealing with some of these centers, they have to get an occupancy, a fire code permit, and I'm assuming that comes from the local government. And is there room for those local governments, like we saw here in Houston, to withhold.
Legislative session just ended recently, as you know, and you are known as a workhorse, not a show horse, right? And so I'm interested to know, how hard did you work this session? I think that your time and effort certainly paid off. Is what I hear.
I think having the experience 10 years in the House gives you, as they say, you go to the Senate House trained, but having that experience of being able to work in a bipartisan way, I mean, that's the way it is. As where the numbers are, you have to do that if you want to be productive. But I passed 32 bills, and the governor signed 29 into law.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So I'm very happy about that. I went in there with very low expectations, just knowing that the Senate is a very tough place to get anything passed. Being a freshman and being in the party of the minority hasn't always been a good place for people like me to get something passed. But I think the whole focus in both chambers was very focused on getting things done that matter to Texas, improving our quality of education, getting funding for Harvey, things like that, and not dealing with bathrooms. Although in the end we did have a plumber's issue that we thought we might have to go back to special session, but we didn't. We stayed away from some big wedge issues. There were some things that happened that I didn't like, which was the statues and monuments that I thought was pretty divisive, and a few abortion bills that I spoke out against. The Chick-fil-A bill, which I was very vocal on the floor, in really defending a lot of rights of the LGBTQ community. So we had some of that, but it just wasn't like past sessions. No SB 6, the bathroom bill, no SB 4, the anti-immigrant bill.
Why do you think it was different?
Elections, the 2018 elections have consequences, and I think the leadership in this state sees the writing on the wall that the gap is closing. I mean, in the House, we picked up 12 seats, and we thought 6 on a good day, 8, 10 would be a stretch, but 12. And then we picked up 2 in the Senate, and that seat in San Antonio flipped. But if that had gone well for Democrats, we could have kept a few more bills from getting through. As it is, I'm very proud, though, of the Senate Democrats, because we held tight and we stuck together. They called us the determined dozen, and we kept the nomination of David Whitley from coming to the floor.
That's another big congratulations, by the way.
I served on nominations, and I thought, nominations, this is kind of a, committee. And whoa, then we were front and center of a big issue in the Senate, and that was confirming David Whitley.
And that's another black guy, Republican-led black guy on the state of Texas, since the voter purge was a national story.
It became an issue in Congress, and I think it certainly gave everybody kind of a wake-up call that, okay, we've picked up our numbers, we did some good in 2018, but we still have leadership in the state that will try to suppress voters. For now 3 or 4 sessions, I've tried to pass an online voter registration bill, and I'll keep trying to pass that every session. We do everything online in this state. You can get every license, you can get permits online. And I mean, people do banking. There's such other sensitive information. And the other thing I try to point out is that this process, an online voter registration way of registering, would be much more secure and cost effective. 83 cents is these are the last numbers I have, but 83 cents to process it the way we do it now versus 3 cents if you do it online.
Huge margin.
Right. So who's conservative now?
Right. Are you, given that Texas is a swing state now, are you optimistic? What are your thoughts about next year's elections?
Very optimistic. I think these last 2 nights of the debates, I think people are energized, and We have some great candidates. I think we have on both nights. We had any of them, I would say, would do a much better job than the current president. So there's a lot of optimism. There's a lot of energy. A lot of communities that typically don't get as involved and engaged. We're seeing more women, more young people, people of color, diverse communities who are watching, and they're engaged.
Finally, I know you have some energy around the death of a child in Dilley. You want to talk about that?
So that happened, I think that was last year. I don't remember the month, but it happened in Dilley after the child left that unfortunately died. And there were issues raised about the care at the center in Dilley. And I was in the House at the time, I asked Chairman Richard Raymond of the Health Human Services Committee to hold a hearing. And in a matter of days, we had a hearing on that and the role of these centers. And I had just toured the Southwest Keys facility in my then House district with now Congresswoman Garcia. And just, I was disappointed with their, what I call a dog and pony show of what they do, and just I felt some untruths that were told, and I'm very happy that Mayor Turner and the City of Houston withheld those permits. But getting back to the Dilley situation, the response from the agency was, we have no idea where this child is. The child is out of our hands. So because of the hearing, we made a public plea. This was being televised. If you know something where this child is, please contact the state. And contact was made, and investigation started. So I think it helps. Whatever tool we have in our box, it ought to be used to get a result.
And that's a good public servant for you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.